The silent threat. The galaxy had long been dominated by the ruthless galactic predators, an ancient and terrifying species feared across the stars. These predators had conquered countless worlds, leaving destruction in their wake. Their strength, cunning, and technological superiority made them almost unbeatable. They had crushed entire civilizations, wiped out species, and claimed vast territories. No one had ever dared to challenge their reign. For centuries, the galaxy had known nothing but their power. It was a time of silence from the once vibrant civilizations that dotted the stars. The predators had everything under their control. Their empire stretched across millions of light years, with no sign of weakness. Other species either bowed down to their might or were wiped off the map. The predators' rule seemed eternal. Among the galaxy's many civilizations, Earth was an old legend, spoken of in hushed tones by those who remembered it. Earth had once been a thriving world, filled with life, technology, and ambition. But for reasons unknown, Earth had fallen silent, its once bustling cities abandoned, and its people disappeared without a trace. The predators had never bothered with Earth. To them, it was just another insignificant world lost to time. They saw it as a forgotten relic, a planet that had never been able to keep up with the advances of the galaxy's more dominant races. The predators had little reason to believe Earth would ever return to the galaxy's stage. After all, the galaxy had moved on. Hundreds of years passed without a single sign from the planet. The predators focused their efforts on conquering new worlds, establishing new strongholds, and expanding their empire. They were confident that nothing could ever stop them. Humanity, in their eyes, was a thing of the past, an irrelevant species that had faded away. But what the predators didn't realize was that, deep in the heart of Earth, a new force was quietly growing. Humans had not been wiped out. Instead, they had been preparing, silently rebuilding for centuries. The Earth they once knew had been transformed. It was a place where technology had evolved beyond the predators' wildest imagination, where warriors were trained, and where ships were crafted that could rival the predators' own. Humanity had been watching, waiting for the right time to strike. For centuries, they had been lost in silence. But that silence was about to end. The signal came unexpectedly, cutting through the vastness of space like a lightning strike. It wasn't loud or booming, but it carried an unmistakable power. The signal sent ripples through the predators' network, disturbing their usually impenetrable systems. At first, they dismissed it, thinking it was just an anomaly, a glitch in their vast empire. But soon, the signal grew stronger, clearer. It was a message, one they could no longer ignore. The message was short, but it carried a heavy meaning. We are back. The predators' first instinct was confusion. How could this be? How could a species they had forgotten about, a species they had wiped off the map, suddenly return? They scoured their databases, trying to find any clue as to the source of the message. Earth, the primitive planet they had left behind. It couldn't be. There had been nothing left of the humans when they had last checked. But as the message echoed through the predators' systems, they realized that it was Earth. Humanity was back, and it was stronger than ever. Panic began to spread through the predator ranks. The very idea that humans, the species they had believed were lost forever, had somehow come back, and with a vengeance, was enough to send a wave of unease across their empire. The predators had always relied on fear. They ruled with an iron fist, subjugating any race that dared to oppose them. But humanity was different. Humanity didn't follow the same rules, didn't operate on the same terms. They were unpredictable, and that made them dangerous. As the predators scrambled to figure out what was happening, they soon discovered something that would shake them to their core. The humans had not only returned, they had brought with them advanced technology beyond anything the predators had ever encountered. The ships they had constructed were unlike anything the predators had ever seen. Massive, powerful, and equipped with weapons capable of obliterating entire fleets, the human ships were designed to fight, to win, and they were on a mission. A mission to take back their place in the galaxy, to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. The predators tried to convince themselves that this was nothing more than a fluke, a strange occurrence they could easily snuff out. But deep down, they felt something stir, a sense of dread, a feeling that something was coming that they couldn't control. They were not invincible, after all. They had never been invincible, but they had convinced themselves of it for so long. And now, faced with an unknown force, they found themselves gripped by the very fear they had once instilled in others. They quickly mobilized their fleets, ready to crush whatever threat had emerged from Earth. But as they prepared for battle, something struck them as odd. Why had humanity been silent for so long? What had they been doing all this time? Why had they allowed the galaxy to believe they were gone? The predators couldn't help but wonder if they had underestimated the humans. They had always been a species driven by survival, and now they were back, stronger, more determined, and with a power that made even the predators feel uneasy. The predators' arrogance had blinded them to the reality of what was coming. They had dismissed Earth as a dead world, a place that could no longer pose a threat. But now, the silence that had enveloped the planet for centuries was lifting. Humanity was no longer a forgotten species. The predators were about to find out just how wrong they had been. As the predators prepared to face the humans, they had no idea that their greatest mistake had already been made. The galaxy had underestimated humanity once before, and now, the consequences would be catastrophic. The predators were about to learn that sometimes silence is the most dangerous weapon of all. The predators, once the most feared force in the galaxy, had underestimated humanity. As their warships prepared for battle, the predators struggled to comprehend the situation. How could a race they had wiped off the map return with such power? It made no sense. For centuries, Earth had been nothing more than a distant memory, a planet abandoned and forgotten. Now it was coming back with a vengeance. The predators could not shake the feeling that they had made a grave mistake, one that would cost them dearly. They had always believed that their vast empire, built on fear and strength, would keep them safe. They had crushed countless civilizations, wiped out entire species, and left planets in ruin. The galaxy trembled before their might. But now, the predators were confronted with a new reality. Humans, a species they had dismissed as insignificant, had returned from the depths of history, and they were armed with technology and firepower beyond anything the predators had ever seen. In the Grand Command Center of the Predator fleet, the leaders gathered to discuss their next move. The room was dark, only lit by the soft glow of holographic screens that displayed images of the human warships. The predators studied the ships with disbelief. They were massive, larger than any ship the predators had ever built. Their hulls were reinforced with layers of unknown materials, and their weapon systems were unlike anything the predators had ever encountered. These humans were not the primitive species they had once known. They had evolved, adapted, and built an empire of their own. As the predators debated their options, a single question echoed in their minds. How could they have missed this? How could they have overlooked Earth for so long? They had been too focused on their conquests, too absorbed in their own power. They thought nothing could stand in their way. But now, humanity had returned, and it was clear that the galaxy was about to change forever. The predators decided to take action. They mobilized their fleet, preparing for a confrontation they never expected. Thousands of warships, each one more formidable than the last, were set to intercept the human fleet. But even as they readied their weapons, doubts began to creep into the minds of their commanders. Could they really defeat humanity? The predators had always been powerful, but there was something different about the humans. Their ships were unpredictable, their tactics unconventional, and their resolve unbreakable. On Earth, the human fleet continued its advance. The leaders of humanity had long awaited this moment. For centuries, they had quietly rebuilt their forces, honing their technology, and preparing for the day when they would reclaim their place in the galaxy. That day had come. The message had been sent, and now the humans were on the move. The predators would soon learn the true meaning of humanity's strength. The human fleet, led by the most advanced ships ever built, made its way toward the heart of predator territory. As they entered the galactic core, their ships glided silently through the vast expanse of space. The crew members, highly trained and focused, were ready for the battle ahead. They knew the stakes were high. This wasn't just about reclaiming Earth. It was about sending a message to the galaxy. Humanity would no longer be forgotten. They would no longer be weak. Inside the command center of the flagship, the human leader, Admiral Lyra Hale, stood at the helm. Her gaze was steady, unwavering, as she looked out at the stars. She knew what was at stake. She had lived through the dark days when Earth had been abandoned, when the galaxy thought humanity was finished. But Lyra had never believed that. She had always known that humanity's strength lay not in their technology, but in their will to survive. Admiral Hale turned to her crew. "Prepare for engagement," she said, her voice calm but filled with determination. "The galaxy will soon know what happens when they underestimate us." As the human ships neared the Predator fleet, a sense of calm fell over the crew. There was no fear, only focus. The humans had been preparing for this moment for centuries. They had learned from the past and grown stronger. They had developed technology that could rival the Predator's most advanced weapons. But it wasn't just about the technology. Humanity's greatest strength was their resilience, their ability to adapt and overcome. They had fought for survival before, and they would do so again. The Predators, on the other hand, were not so sure. Their initial confidence was starting to crack. They had never faced an enemy like this before. Humans were not just warriors. They were survivors. And they fought with a fury that the Predators could not understand. The Predators' usual tactics, overwhelming numbers, brute force, might not work against the humans. They had no idea how strong humanity had become, how much they had evolved. Meanwhile, as the battle neared, rumors of the humans' return spread throughout the galaxy. Species that had once been subjugated by the Predators began to stir. Some had already begun to question the Predators' rule. And now, with the rise of humanity, many began to wonder if this was the end of the Predator Empire. Across the stars, whispers spread. Humanity is back, and they're not backing down. The Predators realized they were not just fighting for survival against a new species. They were fighting for their very dominance in the galaxy. Their enemies were no longer just the races they had conquered. Now they were facing humanity, a species that had always been underestimated, but whose comeback was shaking the foundations of the galaxy itself. As the fleets prepared for battle, the galaxy held its breath. No one knew how this fight would unfold, but one thing was certain. The era of the Predators' reign was about to end. The humans had returned, and they were ready to take their place as the new power in the galaxy. The Predators had no idea what was coming, but they would soon find out. The first shots rang out as the two fleets collided. In the vacuum of space, the soundless battle began, one that would echo across the stars for centuries to come. The vast expanse of space had never felt so small. As the two mighty fleets approached each other, the calm of the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. On one side were the Predators, an empire that had ruled the stars for millennia, their ships gleaming with power and ruthlessness. On the other, humanity, a species that had once been forgotten, now returning with the fury of those who had been forced to survive. The tension between them was palpable. This was not just a battle, it was a test of wills, a contest for the future of the galaxy. Admiral Lyra Hale stood at the bridge of her flagship, her eyes fixed on the vast screen ahead of her. The Predator fleet loomed large, a menacing shadow against the backdrop of stars. Her crew was silent, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. They had trained for this moment their entire lives, but there was no way to truly prepare for the scale of the confrontation. Humanity had come a long way from the broken, forgotten species the galaxy once knew. But now, as they faced the Predators head-on, they would prove to the universe that they were far stronger than anyone could have imagined. All ships, prepare to engage. Admiral Hale commanded, her voice steady and unwavering. There was no fear in her tone, only the cold determination of a leader who had led her people through the darkest times and now stood on the cusp of victory. Remember, we fight not just for Earth, but for every species that has ever been oppressed by the predators. We fight for the future of the galaxy. As the human fleet surged forward, the predators hesitated. They had never encountered an enemy like this before, one that fought with such purpose, such unity. The predators were known for their overwhelming numbers, their sheer power, but humanity was different. They were resourceful, unpredictable, and fiercely determined. The predators had made a grave error in underestimating them, and now they were about to pay the price. The battle began with a deafening roar as the first volley of weapons fire lit up the darkness of space. The predators unleashed their full force, their massive warships firing torrents of energy beams and missiles at the human fleet. But humanity was ready. The human ships dodged and weaved with incredible agility, their shields holding firm against the predators' attacks. Their weapons, though less numerous, struck with precision, tearing through the predator ships with terrifying accuracy. The predator ships were formidable, their armor thick and their weapons destructive, but they were not built for the kind of speed and maneuverability the humans brought to the table. Humanity's ships were designed for flexibility, able to twist and turn in space, making them difficult targets for the predators. The predators quickly realized that their usual tactics, overwhelming firepower and brute strength, would not work against these humans. Admiral Hale watched the battle unfold, her mind racing as she issued commands to her fleet. She knew this would be a long, hard fight. The predators had more ships, more firepower, and more experience in large-scale space warfare. But she had something the predators didn't: the spirit of humanity, the will to survive, and a drive to protect what they had fought so hard to rebuild. "Keep the pressure on them," she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos of the bridge. "Every shot counts. Focus on their engines. Take out their mobility. We can't match them head-on, but we can outmaneuver them." The human ships responded with precision. Their cannons fired, targeting the weak points of the predator ships. One by one, the predator vessels began to falter. Massive explosions lit up the void as human missiles breached the predator shields and sent entire ships spiraling into the darkness. The predators, once so confident in their superiority, were beginning to feel the pressure. In the heart of the predator fleet, their commanders watched in disbelief as their ships were torn apart. They had never known fear like this. For all their power, for all their might, they had never faced an enemy like humanity. The humans fought with a ferocity and determination that no one could have predicted. The predators had assumed that their superior technology and overwhelming numbers would crush the humans, but instead, it was the humans' ingenuity and resilience that were winning the day. "Admiral, we can't hold them off much longer," one of the predator commanders said, his voice shaking with frustration. "They've adapted too quickly. Their tactics are unpredictable. We can't keep up with them." The predator admiral growled in frustration, his eyes burning with rage. "Send in the reinforcements. We'll crush them with sheer force. The humans may have skill, but they don't have numbers. Send everything we have. We'll show them what it means to face the true power of the predators." But even as the predators prepared to send in their reinforcements, they were met with a devastating blow. The humans had anticipated this move. They had baited the predators into this very situation. With a well-timed strike, the human fleet launched a devastating counterattack, taking out key command ships in the predator fleet and severely damaging their reinforcements before they could even join the fray. The predators were now in full retreat. Their once confident fleet was being torn apart by the relentless human onslaught. The tide of the battle had shifted. The humans were no longer the underdogs. They were the ones in control. Back on Earth, humanity watched in awe as news of the battle reached them. The victory over the predators was not just a military achievement. It was a symbol of everything humanity had fought for over the centuries. They had been underestimated, forgotten, dismissed. But now, they had shown the galaxy their true power. Admiral Hale looked out at the stars once more, her mind clear as she took in the enormity of their victory. She knew this was just the beginning. The Predators had been the first, but there were others in the galaxy who would test humanity's strength. But for now, humanity had proven one undeniable truth. They would never be underestimated again. The galaxy would know their name. And the Predators would never forget how humanity, once thought weak, had come to dominate the stars. The battle raged on, and the once unshakable Predator fleet now found itself struggling to hold its ground against the relentless human onslaught. The vast emptiness of space, once a place of endless domination by the Predators, had turned into a battlefield where their enemies, whom they had written off as insignificant, were now forcing them to retreat. The human fleet, smaller but far more agile and creative, had done the unthinkable. They had turned the tide. Admiral Lyra Hale, standing at the helm of the flagship Aegis, watched the unfolding chaos with a mixture of satisfaction and disbelief. Her ships were outclassed in terms of sheer firepower, but they made up for it with sheer will and ingenuity. Humanity's reputation had been shattered by the Predators for centuries, but now they were proving that a species that had been knocked down, time and again, could rise from the ashes stronger than ever. "We've got them on the ropes," Lyra said, her voice steady as she spoke into the comms. "Keep pushing, but don't let up. Every Predator ship we destroy is a message to the rest of the galaxy." Across the battlefield, the human fleet executed their tactics flawlessly. The Predator ships, which had once moved in perfect formation and struck fear into the hearts of all who faced them, were now being picked off one by one. Small, nimble human ships darted in and out of the larger Predator vessels, striking with precision, and then quickly retreating before the enemy could fire back. The Predators had the advantage of size, but the humans had mastered the art of maneuvering through chaos. "We've taken out half of their capital ships," the tactical officer reported, his eyes glued to the holographic map. "We're hitting them where it hurts, and they're starting to crumble." Admiral Hale's face hardened with determination. The battle had reached a critical point. They couldn't afford to let the Predators recover. A single mistake, a single misstep, and the balance could tip in favor of the enemy. The human fleet had fought hard to get here, but they had to finish what they had started. "All ships, target their engines," Hale commanded. "We take out their ability to retreat, and we end this. No more mercy." The order was relayed throughout the fleet, and the human ships adjusted their strategies accordingly. Focusing their fire on the Predator ships' engines, the humans systematically crippled their enemies, one ship at a time. The Predators, who had once been confident that their overwhelming power would crush the humans, now found themselves overwhelmed and unable to retreat. For the first time in their history, the Predators were forced to fight on the humans' terms. From the command deck of the Sovereign, Commander Aaron Bryce, a veteran of numerous space skirmishes, gripped the edge of his console, his knuckles white. He had seen many battles, but none quite like this. His heart raced as he watched the Predator ships slowly grind to a halt, their power flickering and their shields failing one by one. "We've got them," Bryce said, a grin spreading across his face. "They're finished." But Lyra Hale knew better than to get complacent. The Predators had resources, and they had never been the type to surrender easily. Even as their forces faltered, they still had the numbers to cause trouble, and the Predators would not fall without one last, desperate fight. Just as Hale was about to issue the final orders, a new signal interrupted her thoughts. The communications officer's voice came in urgent and sharp. "Admiral, we're receiving a distress signal from a Predator command ship. It's being swarmed by our forces, but they're requesting reinforcements." Hale's brow furrowed. "Reinforcements? They're still calling for help. What's left of their fleet?" "Not much," the officer replied. "But there's something odd. We're picking up unusual signatures. They don't match anything in the Predator fleet." The silence on the bridge was deafening. Admiral Hale's mind raced. The Predators had sent reinforcements earlier, but these new ships weren't part of the Predator fleet. Whoever they were arriving just in time to tip the balance of the battle. How long until they arrive? Hale demanded, her voice sharp. Less than 5 minutes, the officer said, but we're unsure about their intentions. Lyra took a deep breath, thinking quickly. She couldn't let her fleet be caught off guard. This mysterious force could be their salvation, or it could be the Predators' final move to turn the battle in their favor. All ships, prepare for new threats, Hale ordered. We've been underestimating the Predators this entire time. They wouldn't call for reinforcements unless they had something serious up their sleeve. As the last few minutes of battle ticked away, a new fleet of ships, far larger and more menacing than any Predator ship, emerged from the darkness of space. These new arrivals were unlike anything the humans had seen before. Their design was sleek, their hulls dark and imposing, and they moved with an eerie precision, as though they were not merely ships, but a weapon forged for a singular purpose. What in the stars are those? Bryce muttered, staring at the new ships with disbelief. They're not Predators, Hale said, a sudden realization washing over her. These ships, they don't belong to the Predators. Who are they? A message crackled through the comms. The voice on the other end was not one the humans recognized, and it was spoken in a language far older and more menacing than any Predator language they had encountered. Humans, the voice echoed. We are the Sildar, a race long lost to the galaxy. You have awoken us. We have watched you from afar, and now you will pay the price for what you have disturbed. The words sent a chill down Admiral Hale's spine. She had thought the Predators were humanity's greatest threat, but now it seemed they had only been the beginning. The galaxy, it seemed, had much more to fear from humanity than anyone had realized. As the Sildar ships moved closer, the Predators, too, seemed to hesitate. Were they allies, or were they here to claim their own piece of the galaxy? The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Brace for impact, Hale ordered. This just became much bigger than we ever imagined. The human fleet, though still battling the Predators, now faced a new, terrifying unknown. The Sildar had come from the depths of the galaxy, and their arrival was about to turn the tides in a way no one could predict. The battle for the galaxy had entered a new phase, and humanity was once again at the center of it all, fighting not just for survival, but for the very future of the stars themselves. The arrival of the Sildar fleet was nothing short of catastrophic. Their ships were sleek, dark, and massive, far beyond anything the Predators or humans had ever witnessed. With every passing second, the chilling reality of the situation set in. This was no ordinary enemy. This was something older, something much more dangerous than the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Lyra Hale stood at the command deck of the Aegis, her hands gripping the railing as she surveyed the situation. Her fleet had fought valiantly against the Predators, but now the stakes had risen. The Predators, for all their might, were mere pawns in this new game. The true threat was the Sildar. On the view screen, the enemy ships positioned themselves in a tight formation, each vessel hovering ominously above the battlefield. The silent void between the two fleets felt heavier than ever, as if the very air was charged with anticipation. This isn't just a war for survival anymore, Hale muttered under her breath. This is something else. Across the fleet, tension buzzed in every corner. The human soldiers, accustomed to their enemies underestimating them, now found themselves facing an ancient and seemingly indomitable force. And it was clear that the Sildar had no intention of playing by the same rules as the Predators. We're outnumbered, Admiral, Commander Bryce reported from his post. We've got the upper hand over the Predators, but those Sildar ships, they're something else. We can't fight them without knowing more. Hale nodded, her mind racing. What was it that had awakened the Sildar, and why were they so intent on making their presence known now? Had they been watching the galaxy for millennia, biding their time, or had something triggered their sudden return? The Sildar's flagship, A colossal structure that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly energy began to broadcast a transmission. The voice that came through the speakers was unlike anything human ears had ever heard. It was deep, resonant, and filled with an ancient power that reverberated in the bones. "Humanity," the voice boomed, "you have disturbed the balance of the galaxy. Your war against the predators, your sudden rise, none of this was meant to happen. You are too new, too dangerous. We will not allow your reckless existence to continue." Lyra's heart sank. The words were chilling, but it wasn't just the threat that unsettled her. It was the certainty in the Sildar's voice, as if they had already passed judgment on humanity. "What do you want?" Hale demanded, her voice firm, though her mind was still reeling. She wasn't going to bow to this ancient power without a fight. The voice on the other end grew colder. "You have two choices. Leave this galaxy and never return, or we will erase you from existence, as we have done to so many before." Hale's fist clenched at the gravity of the ultimatum. It wasn't just a threat. It was a warning. And from the way the Sildar spoke, they had the power to back up every word. "We're not leaving," Hale declared, her voice unwavering. "We've fought too long and too hard to be pushed around by anyone, no matter how old or powerful they are." The Sildar's laugh echoed across the comms, a sound like ice cracking under pressure. "You will not survive, human. You do not understand the forces you are meddling with. The predators may be your current enemy, but we are the true rulers of this galaxy." Bryce looked at Hale, his expression grim. "What now, Admiral? Do we prepare to fight, or do we retreat?" Hale turned to face her officers, her mind made up. The Sildar had underestimated them, just like the predators had. Humanity was on the brink of something incredible, something the galaxy had never seen, and she wasn't about to let this ancient race stand in their way. "We don't retreat," Hale said, her voice resolute. "We fight. We're not just humans anymore. We're the ones who survived, and we will survive again. We've shown the predators what we're capable of, and we'll show the Sildar too." At that moment, a burst of static interrupted the transmission, followed by a cold and haunting voice. "You misunderstand," it said. "We do not ask for your surrender. We demand it." The Sildar's ships began to move, their formation shifting as their weapons powered up. The energy signatures around their vessels spiked, and Hale knew they weren't bluffing. The human fleet had fought through impossible odds before, but this felt different. This wasn't just a battle for survival anymore. This was a fight for everything. As the Sildar's ships fired their first volley, the space around them seemed to warp with the intensity of the blast. The Aegis shook and alarms blared throughout the fleet. The predators, who had been struggling to hold their ground, now found themselves caught between the Sildar's advanced weaponry and humanity's defiant charge. "This is it," Bryce muttered, tightening his grip on the control panel. "No turning back now." Lyra's voice rang out across the fleet. "All ships, engage the Sildar with everything we've got. We may not know what we're up against, but we're not going down without a fight." The first wave of Sildar fire collided with the human ships, and the space between the fleets erupted in blinding flashes of light. The Aegis weaved through the deadly barrage, avoiding the worst of it, but the enemy was relentless. Human ships retaliated, firing their weapons with desperation. Every shot counted, every strike carried the weight of their survival. Hale gritted her teeth, her eyes fixed on the Sildar flagship. If they could destroy that ship, they might stand a chance. But that was a tall order. The Sildar had more firepower than any force the humans had faced before, and their ships seemed almost impervious to human weaponry. "We're going to need a miracle," Hale said quietly, her voice steady, but her mind racing for a solution. "We've got one shot at this," Bryce replied. "We'll make it count." As the two fleets clashed in a furious maelstrom of destruction, Lyra's mind worked feverishly. She didn't know how they could win against the Sildar, but she wasn't going to give up without trying. Humanity had always fought with a fire that no one had ever anticipated. Maybe, just maybe, that fire would be enough to push back this ancient enemy. But the clock was ticking. The fate of humanity, and the galaxy itself, was now in the balance. The battle was unlike anything humanity had ever faced. The Sildar ships unleashed wave after wave of devastating firepower, each blast tearing through the vacuum of space with terrifying precision. The human fleet, despite its technological advancements, found itself struggling to keep up with the overwhelming might of the Sildar. The Aegis was taking hits, its hull trembling with each impact, but Admiral Lyra Hale refused to relent. Her eyes remained fixed on the command deck's viewscreen, watching as her ships fought valiantly, knowing that their survival was dependent on her ability to lead them through this darkness. The Predators, meanwhile, had been caught in the crossfire, their own fleet shredded by the Sildar's superior weapons. What had once been a fight for supremacy had now turned into an unimaginable war for survival. The Sildar weren't interested in conquering. They were interested in obliterating anything that stood in their way. And humanity, despite its history of surviving against impossible odds, was rapidly becoming a target of their fury. "We can't keep this up much longer," Commander Bryce reported, his voice tight with anxiety as he scanned the tactical displays. "Our shields are failing, and we've lost communication with several of our ships." Hale gritted her teeth. She had seen impossible situations before, but nothing like this. The Sildar were relentless, a force of nature in their own right. Humanity had been underestimated for centuries, but this time, the tide seemed to be turning against them. The Predators had been bad enough, but the Sildar were something far worse. Yet, even with their backs against the wall, Lyra couldn't let her people falter. "We're not giving up," she said, her voice filled with steel. "We'll fight until the last ship is gone. But we need to know their weakness. We can't just keep throwing ourselves at them and hope for the best." Her mind raced as she looked over the data streaming in from the sensors. There had to be something, some vulnerability hidden in the Sildar's seemingly invincible fleet. And then it hit her. She'd seen a pattern in the way their ships moved, slightly off from the way any other fleet would operate. There was a weakness, one that could give them a fighting chance. But it would be risky. Very risky. "We need to target their flagship," Hale said suddenly, her voice sharp. "If we can take it down, the rest of their fleet will falter." Bryce looked at her, his eyes wide. "Admiral, that's suicide. The flagship is surrounded by their strongest ships. We're nowhere near equipped to take it down." "We don't have a choice," Hale replied, her gaze unwavering. "We can't win this fight unless we take out the heart of their fleet. It's our only shot." As she issued orders to the fleet, her mind kept going back to the Predators. They were being slaughtered by the Sildar, but there was something about the way the Predator ships moved that caught her attention. They were aggressive, yet they weren't coordinated enough to withstand the Sildar onslaught. The Predators were fighters, ruthless, relentless, but not strategic. That's where humanity had an edge. Lyra turned to her communications officer. "Patch me through to the Predators," she ordered. "We need their help. If they want to survive, they need to fight alongside us." The officer hesitated for a moment before complying. "Admiral, we don't know if we can trust them after everything." "I don't care about trust," Hale snapped. "We need them, or we'll all be wiped out. Just patch me through." The screen flickered, and the gruff face of a Predator captain appeared. His eyes burned with hatred, and for a moment, Lyra thought he might refuse outright. But then his lips curled into a cruel grin. "You humans have some nerve," the Predator said. "But I'll give you credit. You fought hard. I wasn't expecting you to survive this long." "We didn't come this far to die now," Lyra replied, her voice cold. "We both faced the same enemy. If we work together, we might stand a chance at taking them down." The Predator captain's eyes narrowed. "You want us to help you fight these monsters, after everything?" "Yes," Hale said, her voice unyielding. "Your fleet's aggression, our strategy. Together, we can do this, but we can't do it alone." For a long moment, the Predator captain said nothing, only stared at her. Finally, he spoke. "All right, human," he grunted. "We'll fight with you, but if we do this, don't expect us to be your allies after the war." "I wouldn't dream of it," Hale replied. "But for now, we fight as one." With the Predator fleet now in the fray, the dynamic of the battle shifted. The Predators, fueled by their relentless need for conquest, tore into the Sildar ships with ferocity. Their weapons were primitive compared to the Sildars, but the sheer brutality of their attack caught the Sildar off guard. Humanity, with its tactical ingenuity, coordinated strikes with the Predators, targeting weak points in the Sildars' defenses. They were outgunned, outmatched, but together, they were proving that the galaxy underestimated them. As the battle raged on, Lyra's mind remained focused on the flagship. Every shot fired, every move made, was part of the plan to reach it. She watched as the human and Predator fleets fought with everything they had, knowing that if they could breach the Sildar's flagship, it would crumble. "We're getting close," Bryce called out as the Aegis weaved through enemy fire. "Just a little more. If we hit them now." But before he could finish, the entire ship shook violently. The Sildar had unleashed a new weapon, one that had the power to disintegrate anything in its path. The entire fleet reeled from the force of the blast, and Lyra's heart stopped when she saw the Aegis take the full brunt of it. "Admiral," Bryce shouted, "we've lost engine power." The ship lurched and the screens flickered. They were falling into the path of certain destruction. But Hale's eyes burned with determination. This was it. No turning back. "We don't stop," she said, her voice low and determined. "We push through. We fight until the end." As the Sildar flagship loomed closer, the remaining ships in the fleet gathered their strength. Every weapon, every ounce of energy, was focused on one goal: to bring down the Sildar's command ship. The tide of the battle had shifted, but victory was still far from certain. In the face of unimaginable odds, humanity's strength was tested like never before, and whether they lived or died, they would never stop fighting. The Aegis was drifting now, its engines failing, its once pristine hull scorched and battered. Admiral Lyra Hale stood at the bridge, hands clenched into fists as she watched the battlefield unfold before her. The once proud human fleet, alongside the bloodthirsty Predator ships, had pushed the Sildar back. But at what cost? The galaxy's most powerful warships, each ship carrying the hopes of countless lives, were now mere husks of their former glory. The battle had taken its toll on both sides. As the Aegis staggered through the void, Lyra's mind raced. They had come so far. The Sildar flagship was now in their sights, its dark silhouette hovering ominously in the distance. Their last chance. It wasn't just a symbol of their victory, but the key to the galaxy's future. If they could bring it down, they could end the Sildar's reign of terror. But if they failed, everything humanity had fought for would be for nothing. The Predators were in disarray, their ships heavily damaged, but they fought like animals cornered, refusing to give in. The humans had shown them a kind of strength they hadn't thought possible. But now, even with their relentless assault, it wasn't enough. The Sildar were too powerful, their advanced weapons too devastating. "Admiral," Bryce called out, his voice strained with urgency. "We're losing them. The Predator fleet is faltering. The Sildar are regrouping. They're readying another assault." Lyra's heart sank, but she couldn't afford to feel fear. Not now. She had to act. The Aegis was the last remaining hope for the human fleet, and it was dying, just like the rest of her fleet. She had to get to the Sildar flagship before it was too late. "We're not losing," she said, her voice unwavering. "We'll push through. It's not over until we say it's over." Bryce gave her a hesitant look, but nodded. He trusted her. They all did. "Order the Predators to follow our lead," Lyra said, turning back to the tactical board. "We're going to make one final assault. Target the core of their flagship. If we can breach it, the rest of their fleet will fall." As the command was relayed, The remaining human ships and predators moved into position. It was all or nothing. The Sildar flagship loomed larger in the viewports, a dark monolith surrounded by a sea of enemy ships. Every move had to be calculated. One mistake, and everything would be lost. All ships, prepare for a coordinated strike. Lyra ordered. This is it. We go in together, or we don't go at all. The tension on the bridge was palpable. The crew could feel it in the air. This was humanity's final shot, their last stand. The predators, though they were allies only out of necessity, fought alongside them now, driven by the same thirst for victory. They had been underestimated. Now they would show the galaxy the true power of unity, of survival. As the ships moved forward, the Sildar fleet suddenly responded with a fierce counterattack. Energy blasts collided with the Aegis and Predator ships, shattering the peace of the void. Lyra's crew braced for the onslaught. Every shot could be their last, every maneuver their final chance to strike. Brace for impact. Bryce shouted as the Aegis took another hit, sending the ship into a violent spin. The once majestic vessel groaned under the pressure, but it held. Lyra could feel the crew's determination, their refusal to quit, even as the ship lurched. She clenched her fists, knowing they were close. So close to victory or defeat. The Predators were making their move too. Their ships, though less technologically advanced than the Sildar, were fierce and unpredictable. They weaved through enemy fire, slamming into Sildar vessels with all the fury of their ancient, brutal combat style. Their weapons fired relentlessly, punching through the gaps in the Sildar defenses. Then, a breakthrough. The first wave of Predator ships hit the Sildar flagship's perimeter, distracting its defenses long enough for the human fleet to close in. Lyra's heart raced as the Aegis surged forward, its guns blazing. This was their moment. We've reached the outer defenses. Bryce called out, his voice filled with urgency. Admiral, we need to break through now. Lyra's eyes locked onto the tactical display. They had done it. They were inside the Sildar's defensive perimeter. She felt a spark of hope ignite within her chest. Prepare to fire the main cannons, she commanded. Give them everything we've got. The Aegis's cannons, once thought to be capable only of a limited range, now came to life in full force. The ship's final remaining strength surged into its weapons, sending a barrage of energy blast straight at the heart of the Sildar flagship. Each shot hit its mark, cracking the outer hull, breaking through the shields. The Sildar flagship reeled under the onslaught, and for the first time, it began to show signs of weakness. Lyra felt her pulse quicken. They were doing it. The impossible was becoming real. The Sildar were faltering. But then, the Sildar retaliated. A devastating shockwave erupted from the flagship's core, sweeping through the battlefield like a tidal wave of destruction. The Aegis was caught in the blast, its shields crumbling under the immense force. The ship lurched violently, and Lyra was thrown to the ground, her vision blurring. Admiral, Bryce shouted, his voice filled with panic. She struggled to her feet, her body bruised and battered. The Aegis was still intact, but just barely. She could feel the ship shuddering, like it was on the brink of collapse. We've got one chance left, she said, blood trickling from a gash on her forehead. One final shot. All ships, focus everything on the core. We have to end this now. The remaining human and Predator ships surged forward together, the combined might of their fleets focusing on the vulnerable core of the Sildar flagship. Every weapon, every ounce of energy, was funneled into a single devastating blow. And then, with a deafening roar, the Sildar flagship exploded. The shockwave sent a ripple across the battlefield, scattering debris and bodies alike. The Sildar fleet faltered, their ships caught in the explosion's aftermath. The survivors, disoriented and broken, quickly began to retreat. Humanity had won. But as Lyra looked out at the shattered remains of the battlefield, she knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy had been shaken to its core. Humanity had survived the impossible, But the war was far from over. In the distance, the stars seemed to shine brighter. And Lyra knew that no matter what came next, humanity had shown the galaxy that it would never be forgotten again.